Hello, YouTubers. How are you today? Well, today I'm going to go over another passage of the Bible. This time it's going to be from First Samuel, chapter 17. And I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to start in verse 8 and then go to 15 and then go from verse 32 to 50. And this is regarding the famous incidents of David and Goliath. Okay, let's go down here and start. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our servants and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistine words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to war. The first born was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. All right, let's page down and go down to 32. Okay. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came out and carried off a sheep from its flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both a lion and a bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord will be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around, but he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took off his staff in his hand. He took his staff from his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was just little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. And he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Okay. So there's a lot in this particular passage, and there's 4 points I want to make. First thing, this story to me is a embodiment for me for encouragement. And basically, David's courage really came from God. He believed that God was overseeing this particular battle, and because he was a God-fearing man and he believed God, so with that, he felt that God was going to help him kill this particular Philistine or this particular adversary, just like he mentioned in the story that he had a bear or bears and lions come after him, and with that same courage and belief in God that He will help him, that he had no fear. So his courage came from his belief in God. Now, the second thing I wanted to mention also was that David was himself. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a shepherd that wanted to fight against this particular Philistine. So, when Saul was dressing him up to become a soldier with the helmet and a sword and everything of this nature, that was not David. David was a sheep herder or a shepherd, and he was used to his sling and his rocks, and that was his defense. He wasn't used to this particular army type of armor. So he shook that off, and he said, I need to be who I am. I can't be what you want me to be. I need to be who I am." And that's how he was more effective, being who he was. The other thing too was David was very much underestimated, and that's the thing also that I wanted to mention in this particular story. That Jesse, who was David's father, had 8 children, 8 boys, and the oldest 3 went to war. The other 5 stayed, and David was the youngest out of the 8, and his youngest was really the strongest. And so this particular story really mentions or tries to bring home the point that don't overlook people. There might be stuff in people that you have no idea. Just like Jesse had no idea that his son would be able to do this. Same thing with Saul. And actually, David's brother was very much angry at David because he just thought David was there to take a look at the fighting. But little did he know that that David was the best soldier out there. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the story really mentions the idea of thinking outside the box. All the soldiers were carrying around swords, but David, not using that sword, he had his own idea of a weapon, which was the sling and the stone. So he thought outside the box, and it just shows that that intelligence many times will beat brawn, and that if you use your mind, many times that's going to be your salvation. Thinking outside the box, and since he was able to think outside the box and come up with a weapon that the Goliath never saw, he was defeated. So these are the 4 things I wanted to mention in regards to this particular passage. I hope you gathered some information from it. And if you had any questions or comments, please leave them below. And as always, God bless.